Hello, we're here with Gregg Saretsky, President and CEO of WestJet Airlines, and Ferio Pugliese, Executive Vice President of People and Culture. So WestJet is known in part because of its culture of engagement. What does engagement really mean at WestJet, and what is the role of leadership in creating that culture of engagement?
I think engagement for us is every employee sees themselves as an active participant in the business. They can make decisions, they can be involved in those decisions, they are empowered to make the spur-of-the-moment call if they're trying to decide which way to move. And leadership's role is really to some degree stand back and support the front line in their ability to be engaged and to make those decisions. So to provide the tools and support kind of from the back.
Right.
Ferio, you lead the people department. I mean, it's one of the challenges that you face every day.
Yeah, and I concur with that comment. I always come back to the emotional factor. How emotionally attached can we drive WestJetters to WestJet? And I think Greg hit the nail on the head. When I think about that, I think about visible leadership. There's nothing more powerful than a leader being alongside of a worker when they are empowered to make a decision and building confidence and reinforcing what that decision is. And when it's the wrong decision, taking them through a process whereby they can learn what maybe the better approach or a more optimal approach was.
Right.
Again, tying it back to the results in the business that ultimately they're going to reap the benefits of.
Right. But Greg, I have a question for you, specifically for you. You know, you're the CEO of WestJet Airlines. I see that you cheer on the employees continuously. I hear the stories that you're walking around the airport, giving people cupcakes and so forth. Is that really the role of a CEO?
I think visible leadership is very important at all levels, and the tone is set at the top, clearly. If we want leaders to model certain behaviors, we have to be good at modeling that for them. And so being very visible, being at the airport, helping tag bags. And I think it's a little bit this notion of servant leadership that we're really trying to encourage within our organization, that there is no job that we are not worthy of doing. You know, there's no task too small that is beneath us. And I think if we can model that behavior for the rest of our leaders, then they'll do a better job of being able to make sure that this really transcends the whole organization. So make no bones about it. My job as CEO has lots of facets. You know, in terms of how I engage with our WestJetters, that's a very effective way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Both of you came from outside of WestJet. You know, Greg, you work for Alaska Airlines, Canadian Airlines. Ferio, you work for Windsor Casino and Catalyst Paper. How did you learn to be a leader within the WestJet organization, and more specifically, what were some of the hardest things to unlearn?
The culture at WestJet is very strong. For 15 years, it's been reinforced. So, as a relative newcomer into that environment, you either assimilate or you get expunged. And so it's pretty easy just to watch for a while what goes on. And frankly, your values have to be well aligned. So your own personal values have to be aligned with the values of the organization. And then it makes it pretty easy to fall into step with how best to perform in that environment. And you take your cultural hints along the way. What I have to unlearn is really that leading doesn't always mean the decisions and the power coming from the top. In traditional legacy companies that I was in, those decisions were made at the top and the rest of the organization executed. At WestJet, the learning for me was a lot of the good stuff comes from the bottom. And our job is not to lead that change, but to support it.
Yeah, well, and I totally concur. I mean, for me, the acid test was purely a personal values alignment with the values of the organization. That was certainly what kept me motivated and engaged with the organization. But when you work for other businesses that are rather traditional, in your career you develop kind of a mode of operating that becomes standard for you. And when you enter a place like WestJet to me is a company that is very unconventional in a conventional industry. And to me, it was the toughest thing was getting around all of those, becoming unconventional. Coming from the field of HR, you're typically an organization viewed as the folks that are high administrators, rules, policies, and so on. And when I entered WestJet, I found that WestJet was largely successful as an organization because they didn't spend a lot of time on those things. We're highly regulated, policies, procedures are important to us, but when it came to managing our people, our human capital, if you will, we allowed a fair bit of latitude. And that was a tremendous learning for me because through that latitude, people are able to be creative and they're able to create an experience. And at WestJet, we're trying to build a profitable organization, but we're also trying to create an experience. We're trying to create an experience for our guests. And the only way you're going to do that is by not allowing it to be top down, as Greg mentioned, but more allowing it to be bottom up and using your resources to develop the ideas that can thrust that.
Yeah. Ferio, I've heard you talk a lot about stretching yourself. So as a leader, how have you stretched yourself in the WestJet organizations? I hear that some of your colleagues, they dress up as Elvis and they sing these songs. How have you stretched yourself in the WestJet organization? What crazy things do you do?
Yeah, if you talk to some colleagues of mine that I've worked with in the past, they'd never in a million years believe the things that I do now at work that I would have never done before. I mean, WestJet has stretched me to be more lighthearted, to certainly be more flexible as a leader, and to take the time to actually go to all levels of the organization, not just the front line, and hear what people have to say. But I'd have to say that the greatest area that it stretched me is just putting the time and attention in to actually be completely lighthearted and to not always focus on the task at hand, but work on relationships first. And that's something that, I know in my field we talk a lot about, and as leaders you talk a lot about, but WestJet's one of those organizations that actually forces you to do that, or else it's seen rather odd or a misfit to the culture.
Yeah. We're very happy, of course, that you're here today. You'll give a presentation to the students tonight. If there's one thing that you hope the students walk away with after your presentation, what would that one thing be?
That the importance of culture and how it fits into running a successful business, that culture does matter. We tend to be so focused on bottom line and managing spreadsheets, but the financial performance of an organization is ultimately the way the scorecard gets read. But how you get there and how important culture is in helping you get there is what's important.
Yeah, very similar. To me, the economic engine of any organization, especially one that's labor intensive, is ultimately driven by its people. And as a leader, that's something that leaders can never lose sight of, the tremendous power that an engaged workforce can be on productivity. And at the end of the day, if I think about that as an executive and those that aspire to be an executive, that's your scorecard. You've got shareholders and stakeholders you're responsible for. And at the end of the day, you're not the one that's putting the markers on the board. It's the people several layers through and down the organization that are doing that. You need to ensure that they're there with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gregg and Ferio, thanks so much for this interview, and look forward to your presentation tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.